Ben Shapiro calls atheism a delusion, one that he has so graciously volunteered to recommend that we rid ourselves of. Such divestment is not without purpose, as he would erect an idol in its place. For this, I suppose, I must be grateful, as this has given me cause to shake myself from my mouldering slumbers. It is doubtful to me that you, Ben, will ever hear my words, but I shall address you directly regardless. Throughout your argument, there is a central theme, that the concept of God is somehow a necessary foundation upon which to ground an understanding of existence, consciousness, reason, morality, truth, and meaning. God is not an effective explanation for such things. We learn nothing when we posit God as their progenitor. All that is accomplished is a bald assertion about nothing in particular. Furthermore, an unqualified explanation for how things are is not sufficient as a justification for worship of and obedience towards God. I begin by examining your claim that the concept of God is necessary for human knowledge.
All human logic is rooted in certain basic assumptions about the nature of the world and about reason that are completely unmoored from the dictates of evolutionary biology.
It seems rather odd that you never explore just what these assumptions even are. Surely it could not possibly be that the antecedent assumptions upon which logic rests have absolutely nothing to do with the idea of God, right? Evolutionary biology explains the gradual development of the human organism. It does not, and does not claim to, provide insight regarding the assumptions upon which human logic are based. You conflate the process by which logic came about with its intellectual justification. The fundamental assumptions of logic are identity, non-contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle. None of these assumptions have anything to do with God. These presuppositions also have absolutely nothing to do with evolution. Logic is an entirely separate discipline from biology. Biology utilizes logical reasoning about observable phenomena to arrive at conclusions pertaining to the nature of life. Logic is the discipline of coherent conceptualization. Understanding the history of a phenomenon is not the same as understanding its inner workings. You can know the history of the development of the automobile without understanding the fundamental thermodynamic principles upon which the internal combustion engine operates.
First, we make claims of objective truth, truth that exists independent of human minds. How does such truth exist?
How wouldn't all that which is exist? Clearly the universe exists, because we are here. How does it continue to exist? No one knows, but since, in our human experience, the cosmos has never deigned to simply stop existing, I think that we can safely conclude that things will persist. A lack of explanation for why a generalization of the concept of object permanence seems to hold true is certainly no justification to assert the necessity of a God as an explanation, as the same question of permanence necessarily would apply to him. How would he exist? But enough of this rather silly question, as anyone with a modicum of sense knows that asking in the general, how does truth exist, is nothing more than sophistry. The question brings forth two possibilities, that no truth exists, or that truth does exist, and we simply do not or cannot know how it exists. The first response is absurd, as to assert, as if it were true, that no truth exists, is self-refuting. Ergo, truth exists, whether or not we know how.
Based on the dictates of evolutionary biology, our ability to comprehend a truth should really be no more than our ability to think whatever is most evolutionarily beneficial for us and our genetic descendants. But we don't believe that we think 2 + 2 = 4 because it's evolutionarily beneficial. We believe 2 + 2 = 4 always and everywhere because it's true.
Slippery. We possess the capacity to understand that 2 + 2 = 4 because it is evolutionarily beneficial to know truths. We recognize that 2 + 2 = 4 because it is true. Evolutionary biology does not touch on the reason for thinking things. Evolutionary biology is only relevant insofar as it explains the reason why we have the ability to think. In order for us to know how thinking came to be, we would first have to gain a deeper understanding of consciousness. You allude to this mystery later on.
Scientists have presented many theories about it, but none has been sufficient to explain how consciousness arises out of the physical processes of the brain.
Yes, Ben. We do not currently understand why it is that we are conscious. We can make general observations about how intelligence is beneficial for survival, but a full understanding of the mechanistic process that gives rise to ourselves yet eludes us. There is nothing about the nature of human knowledge or consciousness, however, that warrants the presumption that a God is essential for explaining it. It is okay to accept that we do not know everything, and a gap in our knowledge is not a reason to presume entirely unwarranted explanations that in truth illuminate nothing at all. The function of the God did it conclusion isn't to learn anything actually useful. It is only to assuage a fear of the unknown. This applies to all of your concerns pertaining to cosmology, microbiology, and even the capacity for human choice. You identify a gap in our knowledge, and then you baselessly propose that we shore up that void with, God did it. I do not know how it is that I can choose. I know only that I do. You may make subjective and aesthetic claims, devoid of any verifiable facts, about how the transmission of genetic material supposedly looks like the work of an intelligent designer. But in making such a claim, you still do not validate the necessity of the God hypothesis one iota. You make another such determination with regards to the Big Bang.
The Big Bang is the theory that holds that the universe began with the explosion outward of a high-density pinpoint of matter, which sounds an awful lot like the creation story at the beginning of the Bible.
Ben, the Bible would have us believe that plants and trees predate the stars. Clearly, there is no basis for your attempt to rehabilitate Genesis by drawing up an utterly invalid equivocation between its claims and the claims of modern cosmology. You speak of first causes? Why wouldn't the first cause be nothing more than some deeper logic upon which the universe operates? You certainly have not given any reason for why any such thing must be some particular God. Why couldn't the universe be an infinite regress of causes? You may find such a possible explanation unconvincing, but that is a purely personal assessment. You gave no reasons why an infinite regression or progression is impossible. Actualization requires potentiality, you say? Why do you not apply this principle to God? Is it not the case that acting as an efficacious cause requires the potential for causal interaction with that which is caused? If God carries no potential, then he cannot have had the potential to have created the universe. You keep insisting that if God existed, he would somehow bridge the gap between what is and what ought to be. You never even take a second to examine this assumption of yours. You claim that the greatest flaw of atheism is that it cannot justify morality. Yet you never present a single reason for why man is subject to the supposed authority of God. From whence cometh this right to rule? By what right does he command? What is it that makes his edicts the ultimate basis of morality? To this end you supply no answers at all. I suspect that this is because there are no answers to give. There is no reason to conclude that the supposed is of the existence of God somehow implies the ought of his worship. The truth is that even if this entity did exist, this demon that you call God, there remains no basis whatsoever to suppose that his utterly vile edicts ought to have been obeyed. It matters not what version of the Abrahamic God we speak of. His numerous crimes are well documented by the very scriptures upon which you base your faith. His guilt is in the anguish that he has inflicted through the butchery, rape, torture, and enslavement of countless innocents. Their blood cries out to me from the ground. mind. Human life has inherent worth, you say? Clearly not in the eyes of your God. You speak of morality, yet all that you offer is submission to the arbitrary cruelty of a cosmic tyrant. There are no beliefs more nihilistic than the belief that we are born eternal slaves to the whims of such a monstrosity. You oppose the worship of the state? You seem to have forgotten that monarchy is a form of government. Oh, but I cannot make moral judgments, you say. I am limited to mere suggestion and opinion. You condemn man, judging his mind incapable of perceiving the good, whilst simultaneously presuming the mere opinion of an exalted devil to be the final word. If the Eden mythology were true, then the single most heroic act performed by a human being was that divine act of defiance by the mother of all of mankind. The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil carries the sacred nectar of reason, as it is precisely that faculty that enables us to evaluate all things as being either good or evil, pro or anti-human, that is, pro or anti-mind. You ask me by what standard I can discern good from evil? It is by the standard of the mind, that Promethean fire so condemned by your scriptures. I do not merely have a mind. I am my mind. To think is my function. To think freely, my birthright. All true morality consists of liberating the mind to freely actualize its will. Such a morality would lead to predations, you say? It is contradictory to assert one's own right to freely act, whilst simultaneously denying the freedom of others. There can be no supposed right to destroy freedom. Any predations carried out against thinking minds can and must be met by the very standards that the predator would apply to its victims. Do you take my passion to be some sort of vindication of your belief? One can indeed hate an idea, as anyone with a functioning mind is able to evaluate the implications of ideas. Ask yourself this: is man born a slave, owing his fealty, obedience, and allegiance to some authority? Or is he born free, sovereign over his own self, over his own mind? The sacred cause of liberty, in truth, is incompatible with allegiance to your God, and as such, whatever anger I may have towards the idea of your God is in fact righteous. You have claimed that faith entails struggle, and it certainly must be a struggle for you to have twisted and contorted yourself in these ways, but it is not God against that which you have struggled. If religion truly entailed a struggle with God, then I am a symbol of piety. Is a struggle not undertaken with the goal of victory? Is it that the so-called struggle that you would entertain is tolerable to you only insofar as it is undertaken with the ultimate goal of surrender? It seems to me that any supposed struggle that you would have us wage with the notion of God must necessarily be half-hearted. Such struggle is not genuine. It is not authentic. In truth, it is no struggle at all. Any claim to such supposed struggle is nothing more than an outward display, an attempt to give an impression of work where no work is really being done. If you gained something of value from watching this video, and if you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and hit the bell. I intend to continue releasing content like this, because I believe that the ideas of liberty should be propagated, and that they are worth fighting for.